Who does that? No. Hello. Welcome. This right here, this program, it says it right up there. Welcome to the Wrestling Man. I'm Matt Camp. Weird mood today, everybody. Sorry I missed you yesterday. Listen, sometimes there's work that needs to be done on your road, and it's supposed to be done at a certain time, and then they got some issues. And then issues take out people's electricity. And they say it's going to be back at a certain time, and it's not. And that's okay. I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday. I said yesterday's going to be a jam-packed, loaded show, so that means today will be. What up to everybody out there? Hello to the Matt members that are watching this live at 11 a.m. Eastern, because they get it first. And if you want to become a Matt member, head over to thewrestlingmattshow.com. Click the join button down below. If you ever have questions about becoming a Matt member, let us know. Hit us up at WrestlingMatt23 on Twitter and Instagram, at the Matt Camp there. But we'd love to have you as a Matt member. As you see it all right there, starting at just $2.99 a month. If you're a Matt member at any level, you do get the show live before anybody else at 11 a.m. Eastern. Now, I bring this up today because we're going to have some members-only videos that are coming out. And I wanted to, A, talk about my ideas, and B, talk about basically what you would like to see as we kind of put some new stuff together here for the month of November. Rob just asked, right above who? As always, it's right above Todd at thewrestlingmattshow.com. So I'm not going to fully launch it today, but I'm toying with the idea of doing two different sets of rankings. Now, I could keep this basic and be clickbaity, and unfortunately, sometimes that works, and say, here's my top 5 wrestlers of the week. These are the best wrestlers of the week, and I could do that. I don't like it to be easy, though. So here's what I'd like to do, and I threw the question out there on our social media. I put it in the title of the show today. I want to talk about the best wrestlers of the week. I want it to be the most interesting wrestlers of the week. Because, let's be honest, storylines have ebbs and flows, ups and downs. There are low points, there are quieter points, there are crescendos, there are things that need to peak at a certain time. And a good booker will find the balance in not only the story that they're trying to tell, but how to balance those peaks and valleys versus other storylines going on. You never want everything to really peak at the same time. You want to make sure everything gets spotlight. I'm going to talk about the Wednesday night, quote, war. Who cares? I guess it's good fodder. I guess it did plenty of clicks yesterday when AEW lost to NXT on a preempted NXT. Oh, sure. Something that doesn't, like, it's not like they're going to be running head-to-head again. Sure, NXT won. They did. They put on a really good show. I bring the conversation up of Wednesday because I want to talk about the most interesting wrestlers that I watched this week. And I just said how, you got to be able to balance your show and get people spotlight and get people the right spotlight. And that could be hard to do. Even with all the programming of all the wrestling companies, you still need to feature your main eventers. I will still say that is the playbook you should be working out of. Is they get featured. They get featured more than anybody. There is a clear divide between the main eventers and everybody else. They are featured throughout the show. They are promoted more. That goes a long way. Sometimes you need to tell the fans, hey, she or he's a big damn deal. And we're going to tell you more and more about this person throughout the show. They're going to be promoted accordingly. They're going to be promoted a lot because they are the star. And there's nothing wrong with that. When you try to feature everybody, when you try to give everybody time, you're taking away from what could be a bigger story for a group of people. You're putting everybody on an even playing ground, and that's not what wrestling is. There are clear divides in someone who has elevated themselves or about to elevate themselves to the main event and everybody else. There are people in professional wrestling who can wrestle for 10, 15 years, and they will never hit the main event. And that's okay. Some people don't like that term, journeyman. If you have found your way into a decade-long wrestling career at a major company, you've won. Does not happen. Regardless of the role. I don't know if the old Stone Cold-ism of if you don't want to be world champion, you shouldn't be in this business. I don't know if that necessarily plays like it used to. And I understood that for a while. The champion of a company isn't as important as it used to be, although I will say, at least in WWE, the last two champions, current Cody, former Roman, were very important. And you could see the line of demarcation from Roman's run and Cody's run now versus other ones, right? Like, it's not a knock on Damian Priest. His championship run, his world championship run, it didn't touch Roman's. It didn't touch Cody's. It hasn't touched Cody's. It wasn't the hottest story on Raw for his entire time as champion. Like, he wasn't the guy. He was the world champ. But I don't think people are going to tell you that Damian Priest's world title run was more engaging as a whole than what was going on with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. And sometimes you get that story that's that hot, and they featured it accordingly. But as a result of that, while we did see Drew and Punk interact with Priest, whether it be in matches or commentary or backstage or run-ins or whatever, the way Punk and Drew McIntyre were presented came off and felt and was bigger than Priest. Even Gunther beating Priest for the world title at SummerSlam wasn't as big as Drew and Punk. Even if Drew and Punk, went on where they did and didn't hit like they wanted to at SummerSlam, it was still a bigger deal. Being a world champion isn't everything. Doesn't make you interesting. It's not automatic. You got to run with that ball. There was that report of whatever, Cody's being seen like being seen like John Cena was. Like, no shit. No shit. But I'll throw this out there. Who are the most interesting wrestlers of the week to you as you sit here in the chat? As you watch the show, when you listen on the Believe Network, please subscribe where you get your podcasts. Please subscribe here at thewrestlingmatshow.com. Interesting doesn't necessarily mean top of the card. Interesting is who stood out. And that's the list I want to be making every week. And I think this will be a Friday thing, but I'm working on it just because I don't really, Friday's kind of a wide open show every week with nothing that I review in detail coming off of Thursday night. Sorry, TNA. To me, it's not about, Bobby Lashley won this week, so he's the most. No. Nerdy Dude just said, I would personally say KO right now. And that's what I want to get into. That, to me, in this day and age of social media and grabbing people as soon as who is doing that for you? Who, when you see them, I don't care where they are on the card, what show they're on, what company they're with, who makes you go, ooh, I got to watch what they're doing. Like Cody Rhodes, by all metrics, is a great WWE champion. I don't think I found him interesting in the last month. Is that on him? No. It's on the fact that he got thrown into a match that, shockingly so, no one is talking about the Crown Jewel Championship here on Friday. And I doubt that people are tuning into SmackDown tonight to hear Cody's victory speech about the Crown Jewel Championship. No. What people are going to tune into for tonight, which has nothing to do with a made-up Saudi championship. The hook for SmackDown, and a hell of a hook it is Sami Zayn coming to SmackDown to talk to Roman, whatever it was. I am so invested in this angle of the bloodline with Sami coming back into the fray and the Usos coming back together, and what is the interaction going to be like between Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn tonight? Is Roman going to be pissed he got kicked in the face on Saturday at Crown Jewel? Is Roman going to finally show Sami the respect he deserves? That's not about a championship. That's about characters with depth, with history. Go look around. Let's look at this, right? We're going into Survivor Series. A few weeks away. Let's survey the champions in WWE right now. Cody Rhodes just beat Gunther for whatever. Nearly cut the circulation off his finger with a ring that didn't fit. Where are we heading with him? Are you interested? Do you care who Cody's facing next? Do you think there's an obvious answer to that question? I mean, you would have thought maybe something coming out of KO and Randy, and we're probably still going in that direction. But Nerdy Dude said, I personally would say KO right now. And I want to talk about something he did, and I'm glad that Nerdy Dude brought up KO. Like I have talked about how interesting I find KO right now. That tweet this morning that went up about, here, I'm going to read it. See if I can find it. Because Kevin Owens did something that a lot of wrestlers could learn from. There was a tweet that went up from, it looks like WrestleMania, and they took it from WrestleVotes. They were paraphrasing. Shocker. WWE management are said to be in love with Cody Rhodes as the face of WWE. He's been compared to John Cena backstage. A very obvious tweet. No news there. Of course, Cody is in that John Cena conversation. But here's the key. Kevin Owens quote tweeted that and just put LOL. Right? If that's from anybody else, whatever. But because Kevin, who hasn't tweeted since mid-October, which were a couple of videos that talked about the Cody angle, and before that, he had reposted or tweeted in September about Survivor Series tickets. I can go back very quickly and get to Kevin's tweet from April 27th, 2024. My point is he doesn't tweet often. And by putting that out there on a Friday morning, for a guy who doesn't tweet, who uses a wrestling news aggregator tweet and comments on it, Kevin has now thrown a little chum in the water. Because it plays into the story of WWE protecting their golden boy from Kevin. And just by doing that, and this is when I talk about the currency of social media, you could look at social media and you could be like former Wrestling Match Show guest Matt Cardona and tweet all the time and post stuff all the time. And that's working for him. He put up a comeback video about being the complete Matt Cardona. It's at 3 million views on Twitter. You could be that way. You could be someone that's just on, that talks to fans, that talks to other wrestlers, that's kind of in character, that's kind of not, that kind of just uses Twitter because, and you can engage nicely. You could go after trolls, whatever. To me, kind of gloss over that stuff. Or you could be like Kevin Owens, who, whether it's a hatred of social media and Twitter, privacy, or a combination of that, and maybe, hey, the less I'm on here, when I do say something, it means more, which is, it's Pro Wrestling 101. Less is more. So by him putting that tweet out there and acknowledging and what I would call a, quote, inside report, he's now made that part of the story. And 3 letters saying LOL, getting Kevin back to Cody, gives you intrigue heading into tonight. Oh, Kevin's acknowledging that the company thinks Cody Rhodes is the golden boy, and he laughed at that. I said this recently. WWE right now is presenting Kevin as the chaos that they're worried about. They could have done a very easy and very good story of Kevin just being pissed off and being driven mad by the idea that even though he came to Cody's defense, and even though he's been battling the bloodline longer than anybody, that Cody still teamed with one of his mortal enemies. And they could have told that story. And Kevin being pissed off at Randy for backing up Cody. And they could have left it at that. But they've added this wrinkle of, and it's not easy to do this. They've added this wrinkle where there's some real believable type stuff that is being done. And you have this weird gray area of WWE, in Kevin's eyes, trying to protect Cody Rhodes. You could have just left it at him being pissed off at Cody and Randy. But now, by having Triple H kind of briefly acknowledge their scuffle at Bad Blood, which was not on WWE social media, by trying to keep Kevin away from Randy before that match was made at Crown Jewel, by trying to keep Kevin off the show, by having Kevin post those videos because I don't trust the company, and he tagged Triple H and Stephanie and TKO Group. And now you're playing with this knob. And it's something that you have to be delicate with, because if you make it that Cody is being pretty much acknowledged as the golden boy of the company, as the guy, as the hand-picked successor to being the face of WWE after an unbelievably successful run by Roman Reigns as champion, if you almost admit as a company, and by that I mean, let's say, Triple H representing the company as an on-screen character, not automatically, but there is a feeling to me of, oh, Cody's is kind of the corporate champ. But they were smart about that. Because if they left it to protecting the golden boy, Cody Rhodes, you would flirt with the idea of, hey, wait, he's the hand-picked corporate champ. He's not for us, or he's not one of us, or he's corporate. Can we really cheer for him? And the funny thing is Cody's extremely corporate and dresses accordingly and acts accordingly, and everything Cody does from that presentation is kind of heelish. But he kisses babies and shakes hands and signs weight belts and is on all the media and all that. So there is that level of, he's obviously that corporate guy. And it would be dangerous to present him and him only as somebody that the company is protecting. And I think you do risk, especially in this day and age where people get bored and want something new and want something fresh and get bored more quickly, you do risk Cody getting booed if you present him and him only as the golden boy. But WWE did something that I think was important to protecting Cody. They had Triple H tell Randy, hey, we're trying to protect you too. We don't want you to be on the shelf again. And Kevin Owens can put you there. And we're worried about that. So now, as opposed to WWE just protecting and showing love and giving preference to Cody Rhodes, now they're also putting Randy in that category. Because It's Randy Orton. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's an all-timer. He's a WrestleMania main eventer. He's a 14-time world champion. But he's not ever been a golden boy. He's been the foil for golden boys. He's been the heel that you need for your top guys to face. But for the company to kind of go, yeah, so that's important too. Now they're not just protecting a golden boy. Now they're protecting an asset. And they're protecting them, or trying to, from Kevin Owens. Because Kevin's not going to get that treatment. And I think that's part of it. Kevin knows that's not him. Kevin knows exactly who he is. He's comfortable in exactly who he is. There was a conversation, I assume based off of the Cody Rhodes and Adam Cole comments in various interviews in the last couple of weeks about body shaming. And Adam Cole talked about it and, was honest about how much it bothered him at times. And as I have said, it's not easy to come back from a major injury, especially one where he had a bone grafted onto his ankle, to rehab from that injury, but also do your normal weekly, daily training and upkeep to keep your body in a cosmetic way that it's supposed to be. I'm not saying anything crazy here, and I'm not knocking the guy. Adam Cole is not in his peak cosmetic shape right now. He's still over. People still love him. But he's had like a handful of matches since he's come back from an injury that was major. It does take time to get yourself back there. And I don't know the level of which that ankle is at. I don't know if he'll ever be 100% again. I don't know if he needs to do, because of the extent of that injury, stretching and preparing, and that takes away from normal training. He very, very well still may be getting his legs back under him. And like I said, he can go out there and still be Adam Cole and be over and have solid matches, and we've seen that so far. And I'll get into the match with him and Aleister Black coming up in a little bit. But think about, here's another example. Sheamus comes back, right? And he wears those shorts. And everybody's like, whoa, Sheamus has been eaten. Was Sheamus in bad shape? No. Did he look like Sheamus at his peak physical condition? No, he didn't. He got there. And he laughed it off and all that. But it was weird to me because it's about perception. You expect guys who wear trunks to look a certain way, especially when that's been their look their whole lives. And Cody talked about on some podcast last week, go ahead, body shame me. It's a cosmetic business. We're supposed to be a certain way and blah, 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 blah. And I thought that was a horrible message to send to the world from the number one guy in the company going, yeah, body shame me. Don't endorse that, dude. It's not the right answer. And I'm not talking about Cody. I'm talking about the idea you go, no, go do that. Because people will take that as it's okay then. Believe me, this week especially, people's behaviors, they're going to feel are more justified when they get the right kind of endorsement or the right high up person or influential person says it's okay. So that discussion of Cole talking about body shaming and Cody saying, go ahead and body shame me, it opened up a decent, but not great, shocker, discussion on Twitter about body types and all that. And I think I always come back to Kevin because he is not the prototype. But to me, especially within this story, That's what makes him interesting. Pro wrestling is filled with beautiful people, handsome men, unbelievably attractive women who are in prime physical condition, wearing very little clothes. That's wrestling. Larger than life. Oh my God, who is that? But not everybody can look the same. And if you can figure out how to use that to your advantage and make it part of who you are, then you've created an interesting character. Kevin Owens has main evented 2 WrestleManias wearing a t-shirt. 2 WrestleManias wearing a t-shirt and basketball shorts. And he main evented those 2 WrestleManias back to back against Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then in the biggest story of the company overall with the Usos alongside his best friend Sami Zayn. And then was involved in the main event on night 2. And Kevin did that being Kevin. And I think that's a great example of leaning into who you are and making that interesting. And Kevin can talk. Kevin's got great wrestling psychology. Kevin's also a great wrestler. Kevin, and I'm sure perception is he can't go 60 minutes. Yes, he can. Kevin is interesting because he's not like everybody else. He's in that conversation. Let me get to some of your questions here because you guys are asking some stuff. Nerdy says, Matt, I have a question. Have you heard that Jey Uso has sold more merch than Roman and Punk combined? Also, listeners, grab you some Wrestling Matt merch. Yes, Wrestling Matt merch available right now at ProWrestlingTees.com/TheWrestlingMatt. If you're a Matt member, you get discounts on that merch. I have not. I would be surprised to hear that Jey Uso has sold more than Roman and Punk combined. I don't know if you're grabbing that from somewhere. I would be surprised if it's Punk and Roman combined because I know Roman did big merch sales. Like that title he signed made the company like 6 figures. And the OTC shirts, I'm sure, are doing well. Punk's got a bunch of new and old stuff out. I'd be surprised, but I will tell you, there is no doubt Jey is moving merch in a big way. The tell for that always, other than looking in the crowd, is how much merch he has. If you see someone getting more and more merch, then they're moving it. If someone's wearing the same shirt for a few months, they're not moving merch. New Day went through this. They had to fight for New Day socks because people were chanting New Day sucks. So they smartly went, cool, we'll lean into that. Let's get New Day socks. I own that pair of socks. That was their first merch. Then they added more. Then they got a bit more colorful. Then they got unicorns and bootios and all that. And then they were getting new shirts all the time. Why? Because they were selling. So there is no doubt in my mind that Jey Uso's popularity is a massive moneymaker for the company. And that's why you will continue to see him get more and more shirts. So there's no doubt. Is he selling more than Punk and Roman combined? I would guess no. But man, he's selling a lot of it. And that's a great barometer of where you are. Getting over, where you stand in the company. The more, it's tough for people sometimes. There are people that will tell you, I've tried to fight to get this, or I tried to fight. I talked to the Street Profits. They've certainly been in the news a bit in the last week. How are they not selling these jerseys you guys come out in? The parodies or whatever you want to call it of the local sports teams. They did so many good ones. How the hell was that not marketed? Like that one's like, that's a home run. But are they featured? We've certainly had that conversation about the profits. And this is a conversation I think goes back to at least a year ago. It's like, man, people, who wouldn't want to buy those? Think of the Jersey days of WWE, Cena and DX, and The Rock had one, and Austin had one, and Austin had the baseball jerseys and all that. Like, they got fanatics. They can make that money. They could put that out there. But you got to be at a certain level. And that's the tough part. You got to break through. That first shirt or piece of merch has to sell, and then they give you more. But once you get going, like a faucet, they just leave it on. Rhea, Judgment Day, Priest. At a higher level, Cody, Roman. When LA Knight was getting going, when he was really hitting his stride, they were like, oh, wait, we're going to get this guy more merch. And you had the blue shirt, you had the red shirt, you had the yellow shirt. I remember looking in the crowd and going, damn, I can see a lot of LA Knight shirts out there. LA Knight at a different time would be the guy right now. He's that level of over. You can go back 5, 6, 7 years, and WWE would have been bending over backwards to have someone as over as LA Knight right now. And yet, because the company is so hot, and you have all the bloodline stuff, and Cody, and Judgment Day, and Jey Uso, and Gunther, your United States champion is just that. And I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm just saying that's how deep they are. That even though LA Knight is still getting massive reactions, he's not a main event wrestler. He fills out a nice spot on the undercard. I think his popularity has dipped a little bit. I don't think that's a surprise, and that's partly because of bad timing. You know, I think he did get lost in the shuffle when the Bloodline stuff and the Rock stuff all took over heading into WrestleMania. I do. I think AJ, no one talks about AJ Styles versus LA Knight at WrestleMania. It's like it didn't happen. LA Knight beat him. And then AJ beat him a couple weeks later, and that got him a title shot. Is LA Knight interesting to you right now? He's over. The music will hit. It's catchphraseable. I just made up that term. Is he interesting though right now? I don't think so. But they're in that spot where someone like him can be super over in the mid card because they don't need much more than that right now. Let's read this next one. Rob said Netflix has made some requests regarding the Raw roster prior to WWE's flagship show debuting in the streaming company. According to a report by Fightful Select, Netflix added WWE Champion, Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, and CM Punk are all part of the package. Where does Netflix broadly fall on the interesting scale? I'm interested in a couple things as it relates to Netflix. I want to know how long the shows are going to be, because I've seen this conversation of, well, when they go to Netflix, they'll go back to 3 hours. Or when they go to Netflix, they can go as long as they want because it's Netflix. You're thinking too narrow-minded because there are other deals out there. And I believe I'm correct on this. But Raw will not be going to just Netflix in January. So that show has to be broadcast to other places, which means there does need to be a format. So I don't get this idea of Raw is going to be however long they want it to be. I don't think you have the concern of the news is on, because like NXT's got to be off at 10 o'clock, just like when SmackDown was on Fox in the U.S., it had to be off the air by 9:58 for the local news because they were on, Fox affiliates around the country. And for a lot of those at 10 o'clock when SmackDown was over, the news started. I don't know if Netflix will have to be as rigid. I don't think I don't think you're going to look at Netflix and go, well, they'll definitely go off the air at 10:59 or 11. Like, if they need to go overrun here and there, I think they will. That's not that hard of an adjustment. And I know a lot of people around the world will be able to see Raw on Netflix. Some of those international deals and when they come to fruition and when they start and all that. To Rob's question and where Netflix falls and those requests, look, I think you can probably, for at least the first month and maybe the first 4 months of the year, I think you can throw Raw, SmackDown rosters out the window. And I think they should. I'm going to say something I've said a bunch of times over the last month. Deadline, we just found out, is the last PLE of the year for WWE. But after Survivor Series, there are no main roster PLEs until Rumble, first weekend of February. As we found out today, Rogers Center for Elimination Chamber on March 1st. So there's the roadmap there. We found out about the shockingly large dual European tours happening before WrestleMania. They used to happen after WrestleMania, but because WrestleMania is on the 19th and 420, the European tour is before. Kind of wild to me. Really playing with fire because you can't coast through a European tour. But anyway, I think that first Netflix is going to be presented like a PLE, and I think it should. Now, Rob just asked about Saturday night's main event. Will it be more or less important than Crown Jewel? More. I think that will be something that, with a couple of weeks between Survivor Series and Saturday night's main event, which is the first of what will be multiple specials for NBC under this new television deal, under the NBC Universal deal, which brought SmackDown to USA. I do believe Saturday night's main event will be presented as the PLE of December. So I do think it will be a big deal. I do think we will see titles on the line at that show. I think a lot of people, present company included, were surprised to see that on Raw, Damian Priest became the number one contender for Gunther's World Heavyweight Championship. Now, we're 4 weeks from Survivor Series. Is that happening before then? Is it happening at Survivor Series? A lot of people, once again, me included, expect Gunther Punk to happen. Perhaps Priest will have his match before Survivor Series, and we will still get to Punk and Gunther at Survivor Series. Or perhaps that's Saturday night's main event. Because it feels like, just wrestling logic, CM Punk went 2-1 against Drew McIntyre. Ended their feud. Won their feud. Beat one of the most accomplished superstars of the last decade in WWE. He beat him. That should put CM Punk in line somewhere for a world title shot. I know I'm not really interested in Gunther Damian Priest again. But I would also wonder, if we're going to get to Punk and Gunther, don't you want the full month of build? Like, if you had said, hey, we're going to go to Gunther and Punk at Survivor Series, I would have think we would have known about that match, and maybe it would have happened this past Monday on Raw if they weren't in Saudi Arabia and Punk didn't actually, have a problem going. But he does, and I'm okay with that, and I respect that. He taped that Raw on Sunday in Saudi Arabia. Punk wasn't there. Okay, Damian Priest is the guy. I think they also had to pivot away from Rhea because of her injury. So Io won the Battle Royal. the interest factor, though, won't be as high. Now, when we get to Gunther and Punk, which I would assume happens at some point before the end of the year, at least once, unless that's a Rumble match, yeah, give me a month of that. That I'm interested in. And as it relates, once again, to Netflix and thinking ahead, I think they're going to load that show up. Are they going to get Roman, Cody, and CM Punk exclusively on Monday Night Raw? I would be shocked if that was the case. Now, like I said, especially because you're launching brand new on Netflix, and you're obviously really going to hit the gas hard for WrestleMania season. CM Punk, Roman Reigns, and Cody Rhodes would all be on that first episode of Netflix if I was booking things. That show should be massive. And I believe it will be. If you subscribe or believe that there will be rigid, which it has been for the most part, brand rosters, no, I don't see CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, and Roman Reigns all being on one roster with the idea that they're limited to one show. I don't really care about the brand roster split. Like, I think it's good to have a schedule for those wrestlers. Hey, you're mostly on Raw, you're mostly, but you know, if you see these, Cody started doing it, a lot more do it now. Here's my schedule. Here's where you're going to see me. So Cody's a SmackDown wrestler, but you see a couple of Raw dates in there. Well, he could be appearing. He's doing the dark match. And he did it when he was on Raw. He would make SmackDown appearances in dark matches because he was Cody Rhodes, and that's a draw. I have no problem with the fluidity of the rosters. I think there should be a basic structure of this is who's on this show, this on this show. But if you need to do stuff, who cares? It's pro wrestling. Go ahead. Blur the lines. Blur the lines. Throw the rules out. There are no rules. It's pro wrestling. You could change it. So, yeah, I think next Netflix will get a lot, at least on that first show or maybe that first month. But I would be surprised of the exclusivity of 3 stars of that caliber being limited to one show. A couple other ones here. Catching up. Their dude says, to be honest, I don't care how a wrestler looks. If they convince me with their in-ring skills, that's far more important to me than their looks. For me personally, one example is Mariah May. She looks good, but doesn't convince me in the ring, and that's just my opinion. And that's fair. Mariah, to me, while not super interesting this week, I think she is an interesting wrestler in that I think she hits home runs when she is given a microphone. I think she hits home runs when she's given a microphone and can kind of do what she wants. I wrote about this, and I think in my first or second From the Mat that I write for the DraftKings Network about AEW. And there was an interaction on commentary. It was the night, I think Jeff Jarrett was a color commentator, and Mariah May came on. And there's no history between Mariah May and Jeff is in his babyface role. And Mariah and Jeff started going at it, and Mariah was going after Jeff. And it was extremely out of left field, but it was organic. And Jeff's a pro, and he handled himself. And, she made a joke about my world, and he kind of thinks, well, it's my world, but, besides the fact. And I went, oh, there's something here. I'd love to see Mariah battle Karen Jarrett on the mic. Maybe Karen could find a female to manage to go after Mariah May. But that was, hey, they put her on commentary, and she didn't go paint by numbers. She didn't go out there to mess with Jeff Jarrett. I don't think so. But when she did, I went, she knows what she's doing. I've interviewed her. I interviewed her before she beat Tony, about 2 weeks before that, or the week of. She gets it. I have talked to someone who works with her closely who's like, oh, she gets it completely. She's learned along the way, but she gets it completely. And I thought in the weeks leading up to the match with Anna Jay on Collision last week that she ate Anna Jay's lunch. Like, there are promos that are done And they're done because, hey, we got to create interest in the match and heat. And then there's promos that get done, and they're done well, but you go, oof. Blah, blah, blah's got their work cut out for them. And every time Mariah would cut a promo about Anna Jay and her being boring or hasn't done anything in 5 years or threw her bag, it was like, and guess what? That's wrestling. If she's firing off her best stuff and they're good with it, then Anna Jay's got to fire back. And she's got to match that. That's how good Mariah is to me, is that she can be that mean and convincing and good to the point you go, oof. Man, she crushed her there. I've referenced this before. There is a famous, to me, promo that was done in NXT where Bianca Belair is fairly early, but she's a heel in NXT, and she absolutely obliterates Dakota Kai. Absolutely obliterates her in a promo. And I've talked to Dakota about this, and she remembered it right away. I think that was live on some show I did. And she remembered that. She's like, listen, I didn't have that confidence back then. You see her now, and Dakota can handle it, but it was, it's not like Dakota was cutting all these promos on the indies or in Stardom or wherever. Sure, she knew how to wrestle, but that was another reason, when she was in NXT, you're picking up all of what goes on there. And Bianca was a raw, not the show, like a raw talent. It was always there. It was just, can she put everything else together? But she had that presence about her, and she had that, she could be mean. She could talk down to you. And man, and I remember her cutting that promo on Dakota going, oof, that's a tough one to come back from. And I feel like Mariah did that to Anna Jay. And sometimes it's a good barometer of where people stand and what they're able to do. Now, Nerdy Dude, you said you haven't been convinced by her in the ring. I think she's better than she gets maybe credit for. But I also don't think that's not the focus of who she is. Just like it wasn't the focus of her feud with Toni Storm and everything that came from it. It was all about the character work and promos and stuff that had the nuances of, caressing her to her bosom and Mariah having the faces in the background and always looking at the championship. None of that had to do with matches. They hit all the beats of telling the story. Now, I think Mariah is pretty good. I think if you judge Mariah on her looks and how she presents herself, you're like, she's pretty eye candy, and she wants you to look at her, and she's a passable Divas era wrestler. No, she's definitely better than that. And I think she's gotten better. I just don't think she's had enough to sink her teeth into. Now, they have, and if you haven't seen it, they have teased the return of Toni. And there were flyers or fake newspapers that were like around the arena last week saying, like, where in the world is Toni Storm? And there was a QR code on it. When you followed the QR code, it was this YouTube, and it was a very old news bulletin type thing, like, the Dateline, November 2024. And it was her doing like this old-timey reporter like you would see in like a slideshow thing or something of, where in the world is Toni Storm? She was last seen exiting Wembley Stadium without her precious gold. She then was spotted in Australia kicking a football around with a large man. It was Big Show. And then she jaunted over to Japan, where she found herself back in Stardom with her charge, Mina Shiraka, like that whole thing. And I was like, God, what a great way, to try something different to promote her comeback, but still do so in the range of what her character is. And played into it perfectly. And my goodness, I don't think AEW has ever handled a champion losing better than this. Because Toni lost, Mariah conquered her, The understudy's now the star. She's the champion. And to give Mariah more of the spotlight, and admittedly, probably more should have been lined up for Mariah, they got Tony out of there. But she's kept enough of a presence in the pro wrestling world of, hey, there she is in Australia to promote the Grand Slam Down Under show. Hey, she went to Stardom, and hey, remember she was kind of cool with Mina Shirakawa. She tagged with her, and she wrestled, I think it was Mayu for the IWGP Women's Championship, and they've kept her in the mix, and now you put this flyer out there, and does that mean she's going to be back and wrestle Mariah at Full Gear? Maybe. But Mariah May and Toni Storm are not about the wrestling first and foremost. Tony's been a damn good wrestler for her entire career. But she clicked because of her character. Mariah is probably, someone you go, oh, she's beautiful and she wants to show you that she's hot. But she can work. And I think more of that will come. So I would say with Mariah, she just needs more to sink her teeth into because she's got it. Nerdy Dude said, speaking of surprise, Matt, are you surprised that Michael Hayes and Bruce Pritchard are currently on temporary leave of absence? I don't think anything in wrestling surprised me when it comes to the old guard. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything about Michael Hayes. The only thing I've heard about Bruce, and I guess there was a report that Hayes is personal and Bruce's family. I'm not sure. And if something's going wrong with them, because I know people have jumped right to, well, something happened, they got subpoenaed, or they're involved in this, or they're getting them out of the I don't know. It could be, or it could not be. I don't have to speculate, but you can go watch the clips of Bruce on his podcast. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but he was certainly in a different mood. If that's related to it, I don't know. If either of them are going through anything serious, my best wishes to them. But make no mistake about it. Since Bruce came back before WrestleMania 35, dude, he stuck around. I'll tell you right now, and I told this to people there, I legit wondered how long he would be around. Merger, post Vince, and would there be, hey, I'm going to retire, golden parachute. I expected that. I really did. Now, Bruce has been smart enough to fall in line with whoever's running the show. Whether he was one of Vince's right-hand men in the 80s and 90s, whether he was back in the company and working with Vince and finding his way into things and, okay, I'll be there for you, to Vince is out of power. Cool. Now I'm working for Hunter, and I'll handle that. To Vince is back. To Hunter's back. He's hung in there longer than I would have expected. And whether that is because he made a connection with Nick Khan or the people on the top of Endeavor. I mean, listen, Cody's told the story. He got recruited by Bruce and Nick and Vince. So Bruce has been smart. There are certain people that have that cockroach mentality in wrestling when you can't kill them and they know how to navigate it. He's one of those guys. And while I have heard the stories of what he thinks of women's wrestling and how he handled people like Aaliyah, and that story's been told, yeah, people don't like him. I think he rubs people the wrong way. I don't think he cares. I think there is an element in wrestling when you have to deliver news or book or whatever, or be in talent relations. And Bruce has admitted he doesn't like being in talent relations. But anytime you gotta have that level of being willing to get shit thrown at you, willing to deliver the bad news and say, okay, go deal with it. Willing to be an asshole when you need to be. Bruce has done that multiple times. It's part of the gig. I don't agree with stuff he's done, but I also know he's got a hell of a wrestling mind. And I assume that he has shown that he has value in that post-Vince. Michael Hayes has been around forever. Michael Hayes is your Roman Reigns producer. Michael Hayes is a finish guy. You know, he does the big stuff. He's out of the mix too. Those guys were never going to last forever. So I don't know what's going on with them. We'll see if there's any noticeable differences in the product without them there. Quickly here, because I didn't talk about it a lot. I didn't get to talk about it yesterday because of my tech issues. I wanted to hit what was done on Wednesday, just the top points. I was, I guess, critical of NXT leaning into the ECW nostalgia as much as they did. I thought it was weird, just because the where we're at with NXT right now and ECW, like they could not be further apart. Now I say that because of age, and I said, like, you know, you think of when ECW was done 2001, and then you do the math on like the ages of people in NXT, and hey, like anybody, you can go back and watch old stuff. So I'm not saying they couldn't and haven't. And obviously there's some people that know the product and knew about it. But there's a huge age difference there between like NXT's current crop and ECW. And like, you know, if you were born in 2001, you're 23 now. If you go to the ECW 96, 97, 98, like, you had to be what? At least born in 1990? There ain't a lot of 30-plus-year-olds in NXT running around. So there was that weird connection. They leaned into it, though. And I will say that I enjoyed the presentation of the show. It was, if I had told you 5 years ago that NXT is going to get revamped, that it's not going to be as indie heavy, and they're going to run a show at the ECW Arena, and it's not going to be with a bunch of names that have cachet. Oh, it's, you know, Kevin Owens come back to NXT or Finn. Like, you would expect that group of NXT to run the ECW Arena. And instead, it's honestly more of the opposite. However, the branding and promotion of that show was a masterclass. I wrote this as a note. I said, if you're gonna, where did I write this? I wrote it somewhere. Oh, goodness. Where did I write it? It's going to drive me nuts. Oh, I said, a great example of hyperbole branding working. You would have thought they were stepping back into 1996 ECW with the way that show was promoted. Not because Bubba was tagging with Trick or Dawn Marie was going to be on the show or we knew RVD. I'm just saying they used the old Harry Slash and the Slash Tones thing, and they put the filter on, so it felt like an old ECW show. And it hit the right bits of nostalgia. By the way, the idea of calling out nostalgia on commentary was cringe-inducing. You don't say it like it's so over the top, like, oh, all this I'm getting all this extreme nostalgia. It's like, no, you don't say the thing out loud. We know what we're looking at. But they presented that show so well. And I said that the venue added to the show. For those that don't know, the current version that we saw on Wednesday of the now called 2300 Arena, the former ECW Arena, the bingo call, the Viking, whatever. It's a lot nicer of a place than what it used to be. And at the same time, it's not a, there's still grit to that building. There's a gloss over it. And if you're an old school ECW fan, hell, if you were Tony Khan going to the shows back in the day and you walk back in there and what happened to this place? It's nicer than it was, but you could tell by the way they presented the show on Wednesday, there is still that fans and everybody are on top of the action. And there's black curtains around everywhere, but they were able to fill in gaps. It still felt like a very intimate show. The venue added to the show. The venue became part of the show. And that place does sound good, I will tell you. My first weekend calling House of Hardcore, my second show ever was in that building. I had been to that building many times before. For New Japan, for Ring of Honor, God knows for what else. I've been to that place a million times back. I know everything about it. But it does sound good. And that crowd that was there was invested and they wanted to be there. I don't know how many ECW fans from loving ECW in the 90s were there. It seemed like there were some. But I think they went, hey, you know what ECW is. We're going to run this arena in Philly. We only need to sell about, if I'm not mistaken, 1,500 tickets, probably in that area. Let's lean into all of this. And then let's book matches accordingly. In the opening match, they did Lola Vice and Jada Parker. And it was a hardcore match. And to me, that's the WWE-ing of it. Where it's like, you didn't announce a hardcore match in ECW, you just had them. But it's a different time. And they went to the plunder and all that. And I thought they had a pretty damn good match. You want to talk about most interesting wrestlers of the week? Jada Parker is right up there for me. I think she is money. I think she has found her calling. She is so confident and comfortable in her role. I don't know. The other day, because I know she had cut that promo that I was not a big fan of when she was kind of in that tweener spot when she was going against Roxanne and she became a baby. I played soccer in Division I and it was very rah-rah baby-facey, and that's not her. She's got an edge to her. She wants to kick your ass. She cut a great promo on social media that you have to go watch, talking about Lola. And she walked into that arena and handled herself like she had walked in there a million times before. She rose to the occasion. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but something I'm going to do. And she's a big reason why I had this idea. Next week, for members, So those of you that are watching live, you're going to get this thing first. I'm going to be doing monthly NXT prospect rankings. Where people stand, who's got the most potential. I'm going to do that. And maybe it's me trying to correct some of the mistakes I made when I did those 2 videos of 5 NXT wrestlers / acts who I think could go to the main roster and 5 that couldn't. This is more something I want to do monthly to kind of to take a lay of the land in NXT of who's standing out, who you should pay attention to, who's on their way up. And it's not necessarily about, I'm not going to rank the person number 1 who should be going to Raw tomorrow. It's not necessarily about that. It's about who is showing development, who is showing that they're taking the steps that when they do get to Raw or SmackDown, they're going to be ready to go. Nerdy Dude says, Jada Parker versus Bianca Belair for me is a match I personally want to see. I would agree. I think that would be a hell of a match. I think Jada Parker and Rhea Ripley is a match that interests me. And you know what? Jada's backed it up in the ring. She's really good talking. She is a great trash talker, and I think a lot of credit in terms of developing Jada Parker outside of the work she put in. I think Michin, Mia Yim, and the stuff that they did together went a long way. And I loved what they did together. Michin's a pro. She knew what she was doing. She's hungry because luckily, I think they have figured out what they have in her and how valuable she can be. And the stuff they did with her and Jada was great. And I think it made Jada better. And I kind of want to see them do it again or be a tag team or something like that. But Jada's definitely in my conversation of most interesting wrestlers of the week. After the opening match, which was a hardcore match, which we knew about already, they had Vic make an announcement that, oh, well, based on where we're at tonight, we're going to relax the rules. And you can say it's a booking crutch, but you could also go, hey, that's what ECW was. They didn't do DQs. They didn't do countouts. It's not like they lived off of every match has to have a chair in it or something like that or a table, but it was relaxed. So throwing that in there ahead of, Wesley and Javon Evans and all the stuff that happened throughout the night, I thought it was a nice touch. If you're going to come out there and you're going to do a TV segment for a crowd and you're going to announce a future show and you're not going to be there, yeah, you need to check that box and you want to make that announcement and you want to get it over to your TV crowd that's watching at home because they're just going to be watching. But when you tell Philadelphia that NXT's next PLE is coming to Minneapolis, they're going to boo. And that segment could have fallen flat. And if you want to see a great way to add some fan service to a pretty generic PLE announcement, you got Ava come out there with Stone and Stevie. She makes the announcement, and they boo. Because who cares? We're in Philly tonight. Also, we hate Minnesota, Vikings, whatever. Who cares that Deadline's going there? We're going to boo that. We're the ECW Arena crowd. And then Stone grabs the mic. And the lights go out, and there's Rhino. Just inducted into the TNA Hall of Fame. And he hits a spear on Stone. And I said, it's a great way to add some fan service to a PLE announcement. That is a prime example of fun in wrestling. ECW guy, WWE guy, you got the TNA crossover thing if you want to go there. And you spear a guy that deserves to be speared and doesn't get hurt by it whatsoever, and the fans go nuts because he hit one big move. And if you want an example of why doing a bunch of stuff in a match can get lost versus one big thing, Rhino hit a gore and that place went nuts. Great use of him. Great use of, an ECW original. Nice moment for him. That's all you needed. I thought it was excellent. Here's something I had a problem with. If you're going to push the creative, the extreme nature of that show, leading up to it, extreme, make the open, with ECW music, tell me we're doing a hardcore match, tell me we're doing relaxed rules, the network's got to be on board because they censored way too much. And I get it. Broadcast TV, there are different rules. You can't go to the ECW Arena and blur the screen because people are giving the finger. Or have to cut out chants. Or have to cut away from finishes. Or a conversation should have been had. Hey, we're going here tonight. We're going to do this, this, and this. And these fans might do this, this, and this. Can we get away with that? And that is when you take people out of it. Oh, right, it's still a WWE show. Oh, it's still a corporate show. Because they did a pretty good job. As I said, they did a really great job of making the most of the ECW-ness of it and being in that arena. And then you were quickly reminded of, this is an ECW show. This is a network television show under the WWE banner. That bummed me out. They also got the most out of the city. So for those that don't know, I live there. The ECW Arena is in South Philly, right down the street from the sports complexes. Lincoln Financial Field, where WrestleMania was, where the Philadelphia Eagles play, Citizens Bank Park, where the Philadelphia Phillies play, and Wells Fargo, where the Sixers play and the Flyers play, and WWE's held many shows there. But Swanson and Rittner, corner Swanson and Rittner, 2300 Arena, it's not far from there. However, they had Javon Evans at the Liberty Bell. Not that close. Not that far, but not that close. They had the babyface women at the Art Museum. Not that close to the ECW Arena. And they had Ethan Page and Ridge Holland right next to the Art Museum at the Rocky statue. That is an excellent job. Oh, and they had Bubba and Trick at Geno's. Should have been at Pat's. Whatever. They gave you the city. They put those stars in places to add to it. That was putting in the work of, hey, we got to go out and shoot this, this, and this. It's better imagery. It's vivid imagery. And then when you put Jordan Grace, Stephanie Vaquer, Julia, Zarya, and Kalani Jordan all standing next to each other, and you make them look larger than life, that adds to everything. It's a presentation. And once again, I talked about this earlier. If you have people, these are going to be our stars. This is our main event. This is what we're going to feature. Then they get featured multiple times. Then they get that treatment. No offense. Hank and Tank aren't going to the Liberty Bell for a pre-tape. Nor should they. You're not sending, Brindley Reese or one of those to go do that cool-looking shot at the Art Museum on the Rocky Steps. No. You put your 5 babyface main eventers there. You had the heel women think that was the Ben Franklin Bridge. It jumps out. It stands out. It looks cool. You make the most of the city. When Moxley was in Salt Lake and he's in the middle of a salt field or mine or whatever the hell it was, that looked cool. It wasn't the norm. It wasn't standing backstage in front of a monitor. It wasn't standing. It made it more eye-catching. That will look cool in a promo someday. They could easily use those shots of any of those women, and I'm sure they have other footage. And they have that now. One thing I had an issue with, and if he's going to get mad at me about this, he can give me heat. He can be mad at me. Shouldn't Bubba have been in tie-dye? It was weird seeing him in his full Dudley Boys camo gear. I wasn't asking for Bully Ray. That was never a WWE character. But Bubba Ray Dudley, to me, at the ECW Arena, I watched him wrestle in his WWE attire. He should have been wearing tie-dye. I'm a little bummed about it. It felt out of place to see him in that building basically playing his WWE character. And he did, like, super babyface stuff, and that's why he was there, and I get that. Even though we know he's a heel, and he's better as it, but he put the glasses on, put him on Booker T, all the tables, and here comes Devon. It was playing the hits. It was babyface as hell. He started his own table chant. The Bubba we saw was a WWE Bubba. And that's fine. People liked it. It got over. I just went, hey, for the ECW nostalgia, I would love to have seen, the white Dudley Boys written out on a tie-dyed shirt. Also, in relation to that, I think everybody expected Trick and Bubba to main event against Ethan and Ridge. Not the case. That's your crossover match at 9 o'clock. That's fine. They main evented with the women in the ECW Arena over Bubba with no ECW involvement in that matchup. It was a big statement. It was the correct statement. And here's what I'm getting at. I said earlier that this whole show was a great example of hyperbole wrestling branding working. No better example of that than telling everybody, and I've talked about this plenty, we have the best women's division in wrestling. Here's 10 of them. 10 of them. And we're putting them in the main event of the ECW Arena. And I'm not going to have, I think we're long past this, I hope. The idea of, well, men can main event all the time, and women, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're so far past that. But at a show at the ECW Arena that was promoted for nostalgia and all that, the main event was not about nostalgia whatsoever. They told you, they've been telling you they have the best women's division in pro wrestling. Whether that's true or not, if you watched that main event on Wednesday, and you saw how those 10 women were presented by commentary, by their entrances, by those pre-taped shots in the city of Philadelphia, they did everything to make you believe that they have the deepest and best women's division in pro wrestling. They put their money where their mouth is, and the crowd was with all of it. I was extremely impressed by that. Not to mention, you also opened the show with the women. So if you don't know by now, NXT is the women's wrestling show. They can do the hyperbole, but if you just go by who's featured, how much they're featured, all of that. It's the women's wrestling show, and there's no doubt about it. something at the end I was very happy they didn't hit us over the head with. Zarya spears Jordynne Grace. And then Roxanne gets pinned. And at the end of the night, they all raise their hands up. And they don't talk about that. They reference when it happens, but they recovered and they won the match. So not that big of a deal. But I just saw, I believe here, let's see. Nerdy Dude says, question about Wednesday, Matt. Do you think we could see Jordynne Grace versus Zarya down the line because of what happened in the women's match? Yes. I wrote as soon as and sometimes I take notes on this stuff, clear direction there, but not hit over the head. If you watch, they wanted the glamour closing shot of their 5 baby faces standing tall. And you see the heels regrouping, and, Lash was out there, and Jada, not Lash, and, oh, God, I'm blanking on her name. They wanted the heels retreating, sad in the aisleway. And they wanted the baby faces to stand tall. And they did that. But if you watch, while they all raise their hands up, there's a couple of looks. Not overly angry, not overly animated, but there's a level of frustration you can sense from her facials and her body language that Jordynne Grace was not happy that she got speared by Zarya. It is not hard to go in that direction and turn Jordynne Grace heel. She'll be fine. I like they got just enough of it. They didn't harp it on commentary. They wanted it to be about the baby faces winning the match. But that's right. That's just a little thing that they were able to drop in there. Jakara Jackson is her name that I forgot. She was mixing it up with Lash, and they messed with the babyface, all that stuff. That was really well done. The Iron Survivor qualifiers start next week. A great concept. I'm a huge fan of that match. I think they've hit a home run. And I said that match should be interesting. If you just went off of the main event alone, so let's say obviously Roxanne's not in the match because she's the champ. Maybe Fallon's not in the match because she's North American champ. You had 8 people right there that all looked like they belonged in the Iron Survivor match. You had 2 more at the beginning of the show, especially Jada, who could have been in the Iron Survivor match. Which makes the qualifiers more interesting. Because I see a lot of legitimate contenders. Sometimes you do qualifiers for Money in the Bank or Elimination Chamber or matches like this. And you're like, there's an obvious winner here. They could put together probably competitive qualifiers for 4, maybe 5 of the qualifiers, at least for the women. The men, that's a different story. Standouts from the night. Javon Evans passed the Philly test with flying colors. I think that goes a long way. I called Santana and Ortiz in their ECW Arena debut against the Spirit Squad and House of Hardcore, and I went, these guys, they did it. They got over in that place, and it's not easy to do. And Javon Evans, his music, all of that, big entrance, great energy, and that crowd was with him. He's in my most interesting wrestlers of the week conversation. I talked about Jada Parker. Very comfortable in her role, rose to the occasion. And I also wanted to note, and I know I just talked about her, Jordynne Grace's hot tag has more fluidity than I have seen in a lot of matches a lot of women's matches. And that's just experience. But there is a difference of watching Jordynne Grace and watching a Kalani Jordan. And I don't mean that to knock Kalani Jordan. I'm just talking about that from an experience factor. And Jordan is getting better. She is getting the reps she needs. She's getting more comfortable. There's clearly money in her that she's going to be a star. But whether it's her or a Jasmine Nix or people that don't have the same amount of experience, sometimes you see the wheels turning. Sometimes you see them waiting for a spot to be executed. All that stuff. Sometimes you see someone get a hot tag and, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do here, and they're going to be here. Watch Jordynne Grace's hot tag. A, she looks like $1 million. She's strong. She knows what she's doing, but there's a fluidity and a confidence, and that comes with time. So I was really impressed by that. David said, how long do you see Jada on the main roster? I think she's out of there within a year. I would still want to get her reps in time, but she is coming along at a very fast rate. Nerdy Dude, well, to be honest, I don't see Jasmine Nix in the Iron Survivor match just yet. Personally, I will wait and see who gets the spot. And I would agree. She was, if you had to list performers and experience and skill level, she was number 10 of 10 in that match, probably, but with potential. So, yeah, she could be in one of those qualifiers and not make it. I would think JC gets in. I don't know what they're going to do as it relates to Fallon. Is that her going, hey, maybe I could be a double champ? They could play into that. But I would think at least JC from Fatal Toxic Attraction Influence will be in that match. Let's hit on a couple things from AEW. I know I said yesterday would be a big episode. This is going longer, but that's fine. The Hurt Syndicate was promoted a lot heading into Dynamite, and then they opened the show. It felt big. It was a great promo from MVP, who I will tell you right now, this is MVP's best role. Do a little physicality if need be. He's got his cane, all that stuff, but he is made to be a hype man for Bobby Lashley. I wrote about this last week for the DK Network, just talking about the opportunity that they have with the Hurt Syndicate. I am not a fan of factions and gimmicks that are so obviously tied to another company that you try to redo them and put a fresh coat of paint on them. And, I didn't love Undisputed Kingdom. I don't like the name. I don't like, and I know there was stuff with Kyle and Roddy and then you have Taven and Bennett, and they were, I don't like that. Be fresh. But for the Hurt, now Syndicate, I just remind you, they were a thing in the Thunderdome. And then they weren't a thing when there were fans back. And they never got a chance to be a thing with fans back. It was discussed a lot. I've talked about it here. There was thoughts of, reforming the group and putting Omos in it. Profits were always discussed. Trick and Mello were discussed. Odyssey Jones was discussed. They never did it. They never did it. But now, they get another opportunity. And I say they as in Bobby, Shelton, and MVP for right now. And I think you see how much they stand out. And I've heard the conversation. I don't know, it was Meltzer. Probably him. Great presentation. Too many old WWE guys. That may or may not be true, but I'll tell you right now. I don't say, well, Bobby, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin are just old WWE guys. No, they look like a dangerous, formidable, impressive group. That presentation has not been done with anybody else in AEW. Those guys look the part. They said who they are with MVP talking up all of the accolades of Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley. who they are, what they do. They gave you a mission statement, and they made a point. Show that business card. If you get the Hurt business card, hey, we're recruiting. We have interest. Stuff with Ricochet, and they've talked to, I think Caster or whatever. I like that. I do believe that there should be someone in the group or people in the group that weren't in the original group. Let them have a rub. Let them have a shine. Now, here's the thing. We're doing Swerve and Bobby Lashley at Full Gear. Obviously. Do you want Swerve eating another pay-per-view defeat? That's all I'm saying. He lost it all in. He lost it all out. He came back at Wrestle Dream. He beat Shelton Benjamin. But are you beating Bobby Lashley in his first pay-per-view? I don't think so. It's not the biggest thing. I'm not saying Swerve can't afford the loss. But if you're doing Bobby Lashley's first pay-per-view in AEW, he's winning. So if Swerve is eating another loss at Full Gear, I think it's a good test of his resilience and the fan reaction. Not super concerned about it, but I'm just saying he's probably going to lose his third pay-per-view match in a row. You understood him losing to Danielson. You understood him losing to Hangman. He went away. He came back. He beat Shelton. I don't see any way other than... No, there is no other way. Bobby's going to beat Swerve at the pay-per-view. Cheating or whatever. He's going to beat him. That's an interesting test. We got... Hey, they named Moxley's group. They're the Death Riders. Fine. Good. As we put a clip up, like the day we put it up, they named the group. So whatever. Death Riders against OC and Darby. OC and Darby both in black. I love the dive off the top to start the match. Good heat at the end, directed on the right people. That was a... Here you go. The Mox, Death Riders, OC, Darby thing this week, and okay to do this, didn't get the same focus that it has been. I think they'll get it all back, but it didn't get that opening show focus. It didn't get that main event focus. It was elsewhere. Is that the right move, though? It's your world title match. That's your world title match coming up in a couple of weeks. Should that be opening or closing the show? It's a fair question. Okay, the match a lot of people have been discussing. Adam Cole against Malakai Black, excuse me. Match was fine. It was not their NXT match. I implore you to go back and watch that in Philadelphia. It wasn't supposed to be. All the post-match stuff was weird, was confusing. Malakai basically giving himself up to Cole at the end of the match. I don't have a problem with that, but it felt like it was the end of a long feud kind of thing. Because I know people are like, oh, he's retiring and he's gone and everything he did. And there was a lot of post-match stuff that was very Malakai focused. And then he goes, oh, I'm not hurt. I'm not leaving. I'm not. Okay. And I believe he wrestled on the Collision tapings last night. It just seemed like a lot for a match that was only made a week ago. Then he put him over. It seemed like it was building to something that wasn't there, or a babyface turn. I don't know. I don't have any interest in a Roddy Cole MJF triple threat match. And I know Cole brought that up, and they're doing the battle to 3. And next week we're getting Adam Cole against Konosuke Takeshita. Holy shit. wish that had more. And then the very important question I ask all of you, because he hasn't been in the arena in quite some time, but we always tend to hear from him. Does MJF just have a camera running in his house at all times that can be tapped into the arena so he can do stuff? How does that work? This isn't, Kevin Kelly going to Brian Pillman's house with the Austin thing with the gun. Like, he just has had a camera there at all times when he's not at the show. And I'm sure a lot of that stuff was taped because he's filming or whatever. It just feels weird that we can always go check out on MJF. And then he kind of sends that message in a box or whatever in the ring to, he had a guy to give it to Callis, and I don't know. It's weird. Main event. Great to see Powerhouse Hobbs back. Great. Good to see him with Ricochet. I like Hobbs a lot, and I think there's a lot to him. Takeshita was the second of two champs to get pinned in the night. Jericho also got pinned. Don't love that. The Callis family is gathering enemies. I like this version of the Callis family. As I told you months ago, I think there's more in Kyle Fletcher than there is in Ricochet, and I think we're starting to see that. Cole, like I said, Cole, Takeshita next week. Wild, we're getting that one. But as I said, the Callis family is gathering new enemies. Powerhouse Hobbs is back. The Hurt Syndicate is now part of AEW. You got a lot of new and returning faces. Penelope Ford came back against Jamie Hayter, who hasn't really been as active as I would have liked. You're changing up Kyle Fletcher's gimmick. Will was gone for a couple weeks. He came back. Ricochet's been there for a month and change. Takeshita, you're trying to now kind of relaunch, and he's the international champion. You bring Powerhouse Hobbs back. You got a lot of new and returning faces. Can they all get the right amount of spotlight? And that's hard to do, and we will see. Personally think that the Death Riders, OC, and Darby should have opened the show just to keep the interest or put it on the main event. I agree. I would have gone there. I think it was important to get the Hurt Syndicate in one of those slots. But, maybe they looked at what they were going to do with Death Riders and OC and Darby and said, hey, we're not doing a ton tonight. But the heat we're going to put on those guys, let's put that somewhere else in the show. Did it hurt the ratings? Perhaps it may have. So there you go, catching up. I promised the big show yesterday. We had tech issues, and we're going to do an hour and 45 today. So hopefully I made up for it. Keep commenting. What would you like this list to be? And should it be on Fridays? I like the idea of doing my top 5 most interesting wrestlers of the week. Should it be different? What do you want to see? I'd love to hear your top 5 most interesting wrestlers of the week. Put it in the comments below. Tweet us at Wrestling Matt, at the Matt Camp, at Wrestling Matt 23, at the Matt Camp. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to our friends at the Bleed Network. Subscribe to the WrestlingMatchShow.com. Thinking about becoming a member, because if you are a member, you would have caught this show live at 11 a.m. and been in the chat and talking to us the whole time. But for everybody else, thanks for listening. Whenever you do, it's 5 p.m. Eastern, still hitting everywhere else for everybody at the WrestlingMatchShow.com. If you don't watch it live, you can get it there. And make sure you subscribe. Thanks for being with me. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe out there. And I will be back on Monday to talk about wrestling even more right here on the Wrestling